This is Mike Bonfrisco. I'm an estate planning lawyer. I'm an accountant. I'm a financial advisor in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I've been helping families for over 20 years. I'm going to take you through a workshop that I developed to help explain basic estate planning, wills, trusts, and Medicaid protection in case you find yourself in a nursing home. We're going to be using slides today, and you're going to find me pop over to the right-hand corner, and you're going to see the slides in the middle. But you're going to want to get a pad and a pencil because there'll be some notes that you might want to take as we go forward. All right, so let's get started with the presentation. That's me, Mike Bonfrisco. I've had this law firm in South Jersey for 24 years, and I've been helping thousands of middle-class families protect and preserve their assets. Okay, and we're going to be talking about wills today, trusts. Our agenda includes taxes and why so many families waste money with unnecessary taxes at death. Divorce protection, which is a way to protect your assets in case your money finds itself with a child who's in a shaky marriage, to make sure that money stays in the family, in the bloodline. And Medicaid protection or nursing home protection, to make sure your money doesn't get lost to a nursing home if you get sick in your later years. Along the way, we'll talk about all the mistakes that people make and how to avoid them. So let's get going. A little bit about me. I've been doing this for 20 years, as I said. I'm a lawyer, I'm an accountant, and I also have a financial background. And I think you have to have all three of these things in order to do good estate planning, because I'm often dealing with taxes, investments, and the law. And in doing so, I have to keep up on all these three areas. And so in my life, I've written these two books. One's called Modern Estate Planning, Why Most Estate Plans Fail and What You Can Do About It. And Modern Investor, that's a common sense approach to investing for a lifetime. My office is in Cherry Hill, right near the mall on Route 38. So if you know where the mall is, you'll be able to find my office pretty easily. I'm right there on Route 38, and I've been there for many, many years. Okay, so the number one reason why people don't have an estate plan, or a good one, is because it's easy to put off. Procrastination, putting off until tomorrow the important things that we should be doing today. I can't help you with the procrastination part, but I can help you with the second problem here, which is lack of knowledge or too much information. Too little information, too much information, confusing information. In 30 minutes on this workshop, I'm going to give you good information that you can use as a foundation to make decisions for your family. So we're going to talk about what is an estate. Well, it's your house and your money and your cars and your investments and your annuities, IRAs, your life insurance if you have that sort of thing, everything you've accumulated over your life. And yeah, you need a plan. We call it an estate plan. But really, we're talking about a will or a trust and a way to plan for what happens in the future. In the future for you, in the future for your spouse, in the future for your children, and your grandchildren, and everything you work so hard for. Making sure it doesn't get lost. Sometimes I like to say we're in the fourth quarter of the football game and we don't want to blow the lead. We did a great job, and my job is to help make sure that you don't blow the good lead and the winning game. So let's see. Well, when you're planning your estate, you need to do a few things. Well, the first thing you want to do is make sure your assets go to who you want. That seems pretty easy. Usually it's a spouse or kids or other loved ones. But there can be confusion. Maybe someone thought they were promised something. Maybe you have a very old document or an incomplete document, or you've marked up your document, or you've changed your mind and you didn't get back and fixing it. You need to be crystal clear about that. We need to do the basics right. We need to make sure our assets go when we want. You say, well, after I'm gone, Mike, but maybe loved ones like little guys, grandchildren, or maybe there's someone in your family that's frankly irresponsible. They have a dependency problem, or maybe someone's disabled. If you leave a lot of money to a disabled loved one, they might lose their benefits. So we have a way to protect these family members and these loved ones. We have a way to structure things, to give it a little bit more structure, so you can protect them. The third thing you need to do is make sure it's handled by the person you choose. We call that person the executor. I like to say, if you want to get back at someone, make them the executor of your will. Because if you don't pick the person, the state of New Jersey is going to pick them for you, and they might not be the person you want. So our assets need to go to who we want, when we want, and handled by the executor we choose, at the least cost, avoiding government red tape, often with probate. We're going to talk a lot about probate as we go forward. We're going to understand it's not always the end of the world, but sometimes it's unnecessary and can be eliminated, make things easier for our family. Nursing home costs, death taxes, and all the unnecessary taxes that happen after we pass away, and just general waste, inefficiency. And so I don't want to see this happen where we throw all our money away with unnecessary expenses. This is a bad result, this pie chart. I want to see the opposite. I want to see almost all that money go to the family. And good planning is about getting ahead of the problem. When I'm helping a family, I'm looking at probate law, trust law, tax law, Medicaid issues, complex annuities, and IRAs, and your investments. And all these different investments and assets, they have different ways that they flow to your loved ones. And I have to understand all of that and make sure that the plan works comprehensively. Now, you don't have to understand all the intricacies of that, but you need to understand the basics. So I'm going to tell you a story about Bill and Mary Jones. They're your neighbors, and they're good people. When they added up their assets, it came up to $750,000. It's quite a bit. They did a good job. Now you might be thinking, well, I don't have that much, or I'm single, I'm divorced, widowed. How is this going to help me? You'll see yourself as we go through these slides, and your family. Now, Susan is their daughter. She is a superstar. She is awesome. She's amazing. She is so great, and they're so lucky to have her in their life. Well, they have another son, another child. I know what you're thinking. You know, I made him look a little shabby, so you'd understand that maybe he's not so perfect. He's a good guy, but he's irresponsible, and he's not up to the job of taking care of mom and dad later on. So that's our family. Maybe you know a family like that. Not every child's going to be perfect, but that doesn't mean that they don't love their children. It just means that they have different skills. All right, so what options do we have? Well, we can own things jointly with our spouse, and after we pass away, their spouse figures it out. We call that joint tenancy. That's a terrible plan. A will, sometimes a will is a good plan. We're going to talk about wills later, but sometimes wills can be too simple, and they don't encompass enough of the things that we deal with in the modern world. Wills were designed many years ago, and a simple will, in my opinion, might not do it, might not cut it. We'll talk about why as we talk further. Then there's a thing called a living trust. That's another type of estate plan. It's similar to a will, but it's a little bit more robust. It's more thorough. It can solve more problems. You could die intestate. That means you got no plan at all. Don't do this, by the way. Your family will not be happy. And you could spend it all. Now, people say they're going to do that, but it's been my experience that the people I help they're not doing that. They just like to think about it. Okay, so what else is on Bill and Mary's agenda? Bill wants to get back into shape. He's a little bit upset with himself because he's let himself go. Been sitting around the couch, sitting around the living room too much lately. So he's going to launch himself into an exercise program. They'd like to go on a vacation when things get back to normal. They're looking to retire soon. And Mary has been bugging Bill about writing a will for the longest time. But Bill's been putting it off and putting it off. Now, Bill and Mary always thought they'd have a great retirement. After all, they followed all the rules. They worked hard. They paid their bills. They saved their money. They worked careful. They weren't frivolous. They tried to stay healthy and up on things. If it were up to Mary, they would have had that will done years ago. But Bill is a master at procrastination. And so before they get around to writing the will, Bill has a health scare. Okay? So let me talk to you about this for a second. Bill has a health scare. Bill launches himself into a vigorous exercise program. Bill thinks he's 25. In reality, he's not. It's hot out. He collapses in the heat outside. Ambulance comes. They take him off to the hospital. Mary's there. She's freaking out. Doctors look him over, they test him, they keep him a couple days. He's going to be okay. Bill's had a mini stroke, or minor episode, and his doctors tell him what he needs to do to get better. And he is going to do it. He's going to follow their directions, and he's going to get healthy. And he does. And after a month or so, he's feeling pretty good. And Mary sits down with Bill, and she says, Bill, that was scary. And not only did I have to think about what it's going to be like to be, what it might be like to be without you, and I didn't want to think about that, but I also had to think, what am I going to do? How am I going to go forward? How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to deal with the investments? We don't even have a will. I never had to think about this stuff before. You've always handled it. Well, Bill sees it in her eyes, and he realizes now's the time to stop procrastinating and go write up a will. So they go see a local lawyer. We call that lawyer a general practice lawyer. He does a little of this and a little of that. There's nothing wrong with that, except that in today's modern world, you need more than what a simple will can do. And most general practice lawyers will do more simple planning. Let me explain. Bill says to the lawyer, I want to leave everything to Bill, to Mary if something happens to me. And Mary says, I want to leave everything to Bill if something happens to me. And when we're both gone, we'll leave it to the kids, equal. So we call that a simple will. We call that an I love you will. And I think the I love you will, simple will, doesn't cut it in the modern world because there's too many threats. There's too many things out there that can affect all that you worked for. It's not like it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago when people passed away with a very modest estate. As much as we think we're just middle-class families, the truth is we're leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars to our people we care about. And it's worth protecting it a little bit better. Okay, it's worth thinking through what might happen. Okay, so Bill and Mary get that simple will though, right? And they feel like they feel pretty good about themselves because after all, they have something in place and life goes on. Maybe it's another year or two and Bill has another episode, right? Bill has another episode. He has another stroke. This time it's not going to be okay. This time he's not going to be okay. And over the years, clients have asked, when I sit down with families, I try to get to the essence of what they want me to help them do. And most clients, when I sit down with them, they say something to the effect of, I want to make sure that my spouse is going to be okay. I want to make sure that my kids are going to be okay when I'm gone. All right. And then the only way for me to make sure that everyone's going to be okay is by doing a proper estate plan. And when I'm working with a family, I'm trying to explain to them what it's going to look like. And when I explain to them what it's going to look like, that's when I know that they are going to have peace of mind about how this is going to play out. They're going to live in retirement with peace of mind because they know the people they care about are going to be okay. But Bill and Mary don't have a great estate plan. They have that simple will. And Bill has another stroke, like I said. And he's going to be completely disabled. He's not going to recover like he did before. This second stroke is a big one. So what do we do? Well, Mary pulls out the will. But the will doesn't help you when you had a stroke. A will helps you when you pass away. Bill and Mary needed some other planning, but they didn't know to ask. Because in their mind, they were worried about what happened if one of them passed away. But in reality, other things might happen. And that other thing that happened was Bill became completely disabled. And so if you don't plan for that, we have to go see a judge, a local judge, and seek what's called a guardianship. Sometimes it's called living probate, but it's a way to manage Bill's affairs. That's humiliating and it's expensive. You don't want to go through that. But how are we going to get Mary in charge of Bill's IRA account, in charge of his pension, in charge of his medical decisions without seeking the help of the judge? Well, you might be thinking, well, couldn't they have done some estate planning to deal with that? Yes, but they didn't. And this is the problem. They didn't plan for all the possibilities. And the simple will doesn't do it all. So in addition to dealing with Bill's disability, Mary also has to deal with all these accounts that she really does not understand. It's a mess. And so Mary, for the first time, she's lost, she's confused, she's not up for this, but she's thrown into it, right? And worse so is they thought they had a plan, but it's really not designed to deal with this problem. Ultimately, maybe a few years later, Bill does pass away. And now we're in the stage called death probate. Okay? So death probate is a paperwork process to deal with what happens with your will. So if you have a will, you're going to have probate. If you have a will, you're going to have probate. And probate isn't always a mess, but sometimes it is. So let's talk about it a little bit. Probate's a place to resolve disputes, to pay creditors, and in New Jersey, if there's taxes due, you add up the assets and you switch them over to the people who are going to inherit it. Now, in this first case where Bill passed away and everything goes to Mary, it's pretty straightforward, right? But we're going to go through that probate paperwork process, that red tape process, regardless, okay? Now, sometimes people say, well, if I involve a lawyer, how much is it going to cost? Well, let me tell you what legal fees typically are in my experience. So this is in my experience and based upon a survey of other lawyers. So let's say you have a $750,000 estate. Okay, we ask lawyers across the whole country, and I found this to be true in my experience. How much does it cost to probate an estate of that size? That's a medium-sized family, a middle-class family. And we found that about 2 to 3% of the value of the estate, meaning 2 to 3% of the total. Well, that doesn't sound too bad, but it turns out to be $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in legal fees. Okay, not every case is that much, and some cases are more, but it gives you an idea of what it could cost if you don't plan properly. Now, here's the important thing. The most important thing to do with good estate planning is to be organized, to solve these problems now. So this way, there isn't a need for legal fees later. There isn't a need for accountants later. Things can go more streamlined. So part of a good estate plan is us making sure that things are going to go smoothly later. And it's a lot easier and cheaper to do it when you're here than when you're not here. And that's been my experience. So some people say they want to avoid probate because it's unnecessary paperwork and it can be expensive and there's executors fees and legal fees and it's open to the public. And it takes time. It takes time to do probate. So that's why some people like to avoid the probate process. And for some families, that does make sense. All right, so now let's talk about death taxes. Oh, boy, death taxes, even when you go, right? All right, so here's some good news, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. So let's talk about it. First of all, the federal death tax. If you have less than $11.5 million, you probably don't have to worry about the federal death tax. And most families have a lot less than $11.5 million, so a lot of families don't have anything to worry about. All right, now let's talk about the New Jersey death tax. So New Jersey has two separate death taxes. One's called the estate tax, and one's called the inheritance tax. And if you're thinking to yourself, gee, Mike, estate tax and inheritance tax, that sounds like exactly the same thing. How is that different? I'm going to try to explain it. The estate tax applies to situations where you're leaving your money to your spouse and children. And New Jersey eliminated the estate tax a few years ago. So if you're leaving all your money to your spouse and kids, you probably don't have to worry about the New Jersey estate tax. However, if you're leaving money to your brother, your sister, your cousin, your niece, your nephew, your neighbor, your best friend, your girlfriend or boyfriend, then there is an inheritance tax that they will have to pay on what they get. And it's about 16%. So we need to understand there's no estate tax in New Jersey, but there is an inheritance tax depending on who you're leaving your money to. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, I don't have $11 million. I'm leaving all my money to my spouse and kids, so I'm good with taxes. Well, not so fast. Most families have a lot of money in what's called IRA accounts, retirement accounts, 401ks, 403bs. When you pass away, these things are converted into what's called an inherited IRA. And there's some new taxes on those inherited IRAs. And it's a very heavy tax, and it's a time bomb for the unwary. So brand new law that just passed this year in 2020 makes it so that if you leave money to your children in an inherited IRA, which many families do, almost every family I help has some form of retirement account. Those children may get clobbered with huge income taxes on the entire account if you don't plan properly. So this is our new estate tax. Let me try to say that in a better way. This is what I think is a sneaky tax that families aren't aware of, that's really going to take the place of the old estate tax, and it's doing basically the same thing. So we can avoid this or minimize this, we can reduce this, but we got to plan for it. You can't do it after the fact. All right, well, sometimes families say, well, gee, Mike, I'm not really worried about taxes. Is there anything else for me to look at? Well, there's second family situations, like a Brady Bunch family, second marriage, or first spouse passes away, and then the surviving spouse remarries, a floozy, right, or the pool boy, and how does that look? All right, so I help families solve that problem. Maybe you have a disabled loved one. You want to make sure that the money stays protected. And then sometimes families say to me, well, I want to make sure the money stays in my family, and in case my child's marriage doesn't work out, I want to make sure that my adult children's inheritance stays in the family and goes down to the grandchildren. Sometimes we call that divorce protection or bloodline protection. And more families bring that up. So they bring up this concept of making sure the money stays in the family. Well, Mary's got the whole estate, the whole $750,000. There's no taxes on that when she inherits it, and she's in good shape in that regard. All right, but she's got a total mess of paperwork and bureaucratic hurdles to get through, and she doesn't understand these accounts, and why are there so many, and why couldn't they consolidate some of this stuff? So Mary's left with a complete mess. She's not really prepared for our new reality, because all they did was that simple will, and that simple will really didn't train them for how to deal with the new fact pattern, the new reality. All right, she's overwhelmed, and so she's going to stick her head in the sand. That's her plan. She's going to do nothing. But the surviving spouse, on average, lives another 7 years. Mary could live 10 more years, 15 more years. This is an average. What's she going to do? Maintain her income over that time? And how's she going to understand the investments and make sure that everything is stable? Eventually, Mary is going to pass away. Eventually, Mary's going to pass away. And when you have a will, you have probate. So now we're back into probate. Now, the first time through probate, when Bill passed away, that wasn't the big one. Now, this is the big one. Because now we're going to clean out the basement, cash in the annuities, roll over the accounts. We're going to have to sell the house and fix up the house. There's a lot of work now. And you might have to get an accountant and a lawyer to help you. So there's going to be fees and costs. And back to our simple will problem. A poorly planned estate incurs more costs and fees later on. What I'm trying to encourage you to think about is how you could be more efficient to do a better job now, so you don't leave this mess for your spouse and kids later. But we have $750,000, and we're going to split it with our two kids. We got Susan and John. You remember them? Okay. Now John, he just found out that he inherited $375,000. So you know what's on his mind? What color Ferrari should he buy? All right. He's a bit of a mess. He's got lawsuits, judgments. He was thinking about bankruptcy because he had some failed business ideas, but he's got a windfall now. How long before John blows the money? That's the real question. Now we have Susan, and she is so awesome, and she's not going to waste the money on a Ferrari. But you know what she's thinking about? All the paperwork and the mess that mom and dad left her for her to figure out. Not fair. Susan did a good job with her life. Why is she burdened with all the work? We could have done a better job so Susan wouldn't have such a mess. So many families tell me they don't want to leave a mess for their kids to sort out. So let's summarize a bad estate plan. No protection from the guardianship problem or the paperwork problem. No protection from the nursing home. We haven't even talked about the nursing home yet. We're going to get to that soon. We haven't talked about bad investments either, but a lot of times when the husband passes away, the spouse is preyed upon by salespeople who want to sell her things that are inappropriate. No relief from death taxes or inheritance taxes. No protection if the spouse decides to remarry. No protection of your estate if your children get divorced to keep the money in the family. And no protection for your children from lawsuits and creditors and bankruptcy. We can do a better job for our family. There's got to be a better way. So, of course, over the last 20 years, we've developed some better planning. One tool that I use is called a living trust. A living trust is a type of estate plan. Okay, I don't always write a living trust. I often write a will, but I don't write a simple will. Okay, so there's three basic ways to do it. There's a will plan, there's a trust plan, which we're going to talk about next, and then there's what we call a combination approach, a will and a trust. And so it's only after I meet with the family can I figure out what the right plan is, what's going to be the best thing for them. All right? But a living trust, I'm going to talk about that today so you have a foundation so that if I end up talking to you later, we'll have a way to understand how a trust works. All right? So the trust, think about a trust as if it's a bowl that you put your assets in, right? And the magic is how you hold title to the assets. So Bill and Mary, they might own the assets together, jointly, or in their own names. But when we have a trust, we put the assets in the trust. And why we do it is so that it helps us later. But when you have a trust, it's business as usual. You're in complete control. It's organized. The trust can be amended or revoked. There's no change in your property taxes, no income tax changes, and no new forms to file. So a trust is a way to organize your assets and protect them. And we're going to see how it protects you and simplifies things as we go forward. All right. So we're going to talk about how Bill and Mary, while they're living, and then when Bill passes, and then when the kids inherit. When Bill and Mary are alive, they're the creators of the trust, they're the trustees of the trust, and they benefit from the trust. So they're in the driver's seat. Bill has his stroke like before, but unlike before, we don't have to go see this grumpy judge. Unlike before, we have eliminated this step because we thought to ourselves, hey, what happens if one of us gets sick? Who's in charge? Well, the other spouse. And if the other spouse can't do it, Susan would be the backup. We planned if this should happen. So it doesn't cost us anything, but more importantly, it takes away the aggravation and all the other issues that go along with it. Ultimately, Bill does pass away. Does his estate go into probate? Remember, before when we had a will, we had probate. But when you have a trust, you eliminate probate. And sometimes that's a good thing because what we're trying to do is streamline this so to avoid unnecessary bureaucracy. See, the probate system really comes from a 500-year-old French legal system back in Europe. And we're still using basically the same system that we had many hundreds of years ago to protect creditors in Europe. Over the years, we've developed ways to streamline it, to make things better. And a good estate plan seeks to do that, all right? So we don't have a court process, no public record, no out-of-state probate. We have a way to make things go a lot smoother and quicker for our family. And when you make things more efficient, you save money. All right, now earlier, we didn't even touch on Medicaid and nursing home, but now we have to. Mary gets sick. She's diagnosed with Alzheimer's. What are we going to do? How are we going to pay for it? It's expensive, right? We're talking about in-home care, adult daycare, assisted living care, and nursing care. How can we protect our family in case one of us gets sick, right? Well, you can use all the money in your savings. That's one possibility. Another possibility is to rely on a government program called Medicaid. Now, Medicaid is not like Medicare. Medicaid is a government program. It's a backup program, all right? And it's there for you if you run out of money. But there's some rules in place that say that if you protect your asset with a special type of trust, we call it a Medicaid protection trust, where you protect your assets in that trust, Later on, if you get sick, you don't have to use those assets for your care. You can qualify for Medicaid before you go broke. You can qualify for Medicaid without spending all your money. And good estate plan is about doing that, all right? So the key benefits of a Medicaid trust is to protect your life savings, to have some peace of mind that just in case you get sick, there's a way to protect it, to maintain some control, and to preserve assets for your loved ones. So that's why we do the Medicaid trust, so we can have some level of control and make sure that we're not going to get wiped out if me or one of our husband or wife, or if you're a single person, if you get sick. All right. Now, ultimately, Mary does pass away. So now, are we back in that probate process? The answer is no, because we did a trust, and the trust protects our assets from the nursing home. The trust protects our assets from probate. The trust protects our assets from unnecessary bureaucracy. So we did some planning to avoid these unnecessary steps, like seeing the grumpy judge. All right. Now, I've talked about a lot of really great information in this webinar. But remember, understanding this is the first step. But it's basically worthless if you don't do anything about it. You have to take action in order to protect your family. Understanding how a will and trust work and the benefits and the drawbacks, that's wonderful. Understanding that you can protect your assets from the nursing home with a Medicaid protection trust, that's great. Understanding that there's some taxes that you can eliminate for your loved ones after you pass away. Understanding that it's possible to save a lot of money and to make sure that all your assets stay in the family. Those are all important things. But if you do nothing about it, none of those benefits will go to your family. So you have to take action. All right. Now, I've been doing this for a while. And over the years, my goal has been to make sure that clients get the best possible retirement with peace of mind. We're committed to protecting the legacy of our clients. We help make sure our families will be okay. And we've been doing this for many, many years, right? Now, you don't have to go to a lawyer that's been doing this for many years. You can go on the internet and do it yourself. LegalZoom and other websites promise that you can hit a couple buttons and have great estate planning documents. But I think you'll understand that those are just forms. It's a computer program. It asks you questions, you fill in blanks. But it's not legal advice. So it's really a world of difference. I tell people, if you really want a form, go to Staples because they sell them for 20 bucks and it's cheaper than LegalZoom. If you're just looking for forms, you don't really need a lawyer. But the families that I help understand that we're not about just giving people forms. We're really about protecting them and making sure it's going to work, that their family is going to be okay when the time comes. All right. So these last few slides will help us clarify in your mind what's important to you. See, what's important to me doesn't matter, but what's important to you does, of course. So this may help you clarify what's important to you. So as I go through these points, I just want you to take a note. Which ones are really important to you? Maybe you circle those on your notepad. Maybe you just jot it down, okay? Make sure there's a written plan to handle my affairs. A crystal clear plan, no confusion. We talked about that. How important is that to you? I want to minimize all the taxes. I hate the government taxes. I don't want to give them any more money. I've given them enough of my money. I want to keep the money in my family. I help people deal with the tax problem all the time. I want to avoid living probate and death probate, all that paperwork process. I want to make sure that my estate stays in the family. My kids have a shaky marriage. I want to make sure if my spouse remarries after death, that the money doesn't go to the new spouse. I want to make sure my assets are protected from a nursing home in case one of us gets sick. I want to make sure my investments are protected from market ups and downs. I want to make sure my assets, both me and my spouse, know what we have. And so when one of us is gone, the other one is not lost, confused. When you do a good estate plan, you clarify for the family, for the husband and wife, what you have and why you have it. I want to protect my spouse and family from vultures who prey on grieving heirs. And I want to work with an experienced and trustworthy estate planning firm that's looking after my best interests. So those are the things that people brought up over the years that are important to them. Yeah, you sat through this workshop, and I appreciate that. It's dry stuff, I know. Imagine I've been doing this for 25 years, so it's pretty dry for me. But I really like helping people. And so if you sat through the workshop, there's an opportunity for you to speak to me. And that can take a couple of forms. We might do a phone call. We might do a Zoom call. Or we might even have an in-office appointment. That'll depend on on what's best for you. But here's the deal. I need you to accept that there's a few simple rules. Now, we don't charge for the appointment, but we ask that after you watch the video, you fill out some information, some basic information about yourself, so we can contact you and talk to you about setting up an appointment. And we want you to set that appointment up soon. Okay, so if you watch the video, you fill out the information, you send it in, and my office will reach out to you, and we'll figure out a time that we can have a conversation. I don't charge for the conversation, and if there's something I think that I can help you with, I'll tell you how I can help you, and you can decide if it's right for you. All right? So I hope that you enjoyed the workshop. I hope that this information was helpful to you. And if you need us, you know where you can find us. Thank you. Bye.